Yeah, live.
Right. Hi there, and welcome everyone to this episode of Totally Unscripted. So, I'm delighted today to be joined by Waqar Ahmad, who's been a long-time contributor to the Google Apps Script community. Perhaps gone a bit quiet recently, but it's great to see him come back quite loud, vocal, and continuing his track of doing really interesting stuff. So, welcome, Waqar. Before we go into Waqar's presentation about API.ai, we'll just quickly go through the running order for the show. So, as usual, we'll do a bit of community news. Waqar will do his bit, and then one of the main news items over the last month has been the new app verification process. So, what we'll do is we're going to spend a bit of time on that at the end of the show. Just to quickly go through a couple of bits and pieces. So, as I mentioned, the main news item is the app verification. We'll come back to that. So, however, the only other piece I thought we would just highlight is community contribution. So, the thing that really caught my eye recently was something that Bruce McPherson has been testing the water with. So he's looking at people if they're interested in joining a register of AppScript consultants. So on the Google Plus community, there is a dedicated, looking for a consultant tab within the community. But Bruce is putting together a slide deck, and you can follow the link to that post, and we'll publish the slides for this session after the show. So if you're developing AppScript commercially and you just want to get your name out there, then follow Bruce's link and follow the instructions there. And I think that really covers everything. So as I mentioned, we're going to do app verification after Waqar's finished his bit. So this is a fascinating talk. I think you'll find that Waqar is going to give us in a second. So Waqar is talking about intelligent conversational apps using API.ai, which is a Google service. So rather than stealing all Waqar's thunder, I'll hand it over to you, Waqar, and take us through it.
Okay, wow. Thank you, Martin. And I welcome all of you to the show. So today I will talk about making intelligent conversational apps with Google Apps Script and API.ai. So the agenda for the Apps Script for this session is I will first briefly introduce what is API.ai, and then I will discuss about API.ai webhook, which we will use with Google Apps Script. And then I will explain how we can make Google Apps Script web app as a API.ai webhook. And then I will go through some codes so that you get to know how I have implemented it. And then I will go to the demo and then explain that demo, how I set up that demo with AppScript and API.ai. Okay. So what is API.ai? API.ai is basically a conversational use.
Do you want to share your slides? I know you've got a slide deck. Do you want to?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So I will go through these topics. So what is API.ai? So API.ai is basically a conversational user experience platform by Google, which enables branch unique natural language interaction for devices like Google Home Assistant, or you can make applications and services using this API.ai platform. So machine learning allows your API.ai agent to understand a user's interaction as natural language and convert them into structured data, or in API.ai terminology, your agent uses machine learning algorithms to match user requests to specific intents. API.ai automatically matches what the user wants to say, and then extract the entities and relevant data from the user input. Okay. So in API.ai, we use webhook to integrate the API.ai agent with third-party services. So when you set up an API.ai webhook, it allows you to pass the information from the matched intent into a web service and then get a result from it. Okay. So in this case, we will use Google Apps Script web app as a web service with API.ai webhook. Apps Script web service as a API.ai webhook. Apps Script content service, we can turn the Apps Script web app into a web service. So when someone calls this web service, the web service returns data to the caller based on this request. And also we know that the content service works on a temporary redirect. Whenever you request for some data to the Apps Script web service, which uses content service, it will automatically redirect to a Google usercontent.com URL, temporary URL. So, which is different URL than the API URL. So the problem is that API.ai webhook does not follow the redirect. So you cannot integrate API.ai with Apps Script service directly. So I came out with a work around web proxy. So I made this web proxy using Google App Engine. You can use Google Cloud Function also in this case, but I used Google App Engine. So you see that between API.agent and Apps Script service is Google Apps App Engine proxy. So what it does basically, when it gets the request from the API.ai agent, post request. So, and along with the post request, it sends a header, web app URL, header with the web app URL, so that the proxy knows where it has to forward the request. So in the web app URL, in the web app URL header, we write the access service URL, and then this is forwarded to the. You see that this is forwarded to the Google App Engine proxy. This is forwarded to the access script service. So after that, Apps Script web service receives the data. It processes the data and returns the response by a 302 redirect to the Google App Engine proxy. And then Google App Engine proxy returns the data returns the response to the API.ai agent. So this is the total setup in order to make the API.ai agent talk to the Apps Script web service. So this is the GI proxy code. Here I receive the web app URL header, and then Google App Engine proxy makes a request to the web app URL, which is received in the header, and all the payload is forwarded to the this web app URL. And whatever is received from the web app URL, this is returned to the Google App Engine. Google App Engine response as a Google App Engine response, and it is returned back to the API.ai agent. So this is the public link for the App Engine proxy. So this is the file for the proxy. So this is public link. You can go to this URL and then find the code for the proxy. So I am back to the presentation, and then this is Apps Script web service code. Here I received data from the Google App Engine proxy as a post request. So I use here as a to post as entry point. Here I get the content which is sent by the Google App Engine proxy, and then I receive structured data which is received by the API.ai agent. If you go to the API.ai documentation, you will see that the request come from this form. In this this format. Here in this object is result object, and under the parameters, all the inputs which you have extracted from the users language. So this will come under the parameters. So I use this dot result dot parameters in the Google app in the access script proxy. So I receive it here, and then I process the data which is received, and then I return the response to the Google App Engine proxy, which is then returned back to the Google API.ai agent. So let us take a look on the demo. So first, I will go to API.ai console and show you what is the setup in the API.ai. This is a simple board which from which a user can interact and book an appointment to the owner of the board. Okay, so here I made an book appointment, and these are the text what the user might say. Based on this text, API.ai agent will know that the person wants to book a meeting, and then these are the entities which are required from the user in order to book an appointment. So this is date, time, and the name of the person, and then email ID of the person. So if user doesn't provide any of these parameters, so there will be a questions like what should be the prompt from the board. So here I have defined the prompts, like if the date is missing, then bot will say, do you have a date in mind, or like, when do you want to meet? Similarly for time, if there is, first it will ask for date. When there is a date, then it will say what time on that date. Okay, so it will ask the user like this. So this is how we extract the input from the user. So and the other is access script web service which I have set up. I go through the code here. So in this case, the request is received in the do post, and then the post content is extracted, which is then sent to the serve board function, and then from here I get the user input, structured user input, and from that input I get the date, and then I make it as start date and end date time as half an hour slot on my calendar from the time when the user has requested. Okay, so it's like start time and I have made here, and then using calendar app I am making creating an event, and then the user I add the person as a guest in that meeting. And then access script web service returns the response that thank you and the name. I have booked your appointment. You will receive a mail notification. So this was a very simple setup, just to show you how you can integrate the apps script web service with API.ai agent. So I will go through the demo now. So I go to the integrations. For quick integration is the web demo which is inbuilt in the API.ai. So I will open that demo. I'll make the screen smaller so that it looks like a chat box. Say, I want to say here, I want to meet. So API.ai agent automatically knows that you want to book a meeting. So it asks for, do you have a date in mind? So I say yes on next Thursday. So it knows that on 10th August, that is the next Thursday. So what time on next Thursday? I say 11 a.m. may I know your name? So I say it has your email ID. I say, now it is interacting with the AI web service. And then request was sent to the access web service, and the response is written from the access web service. So it says, thank you, I have booked your appointment. You will receive a mail notification shortly in your mailbox. So let us check my calendar. So I'll go to calendar.com. So the appointment was booked on 10th August. I will go to 10th August. You see that there is a meeting with Nitin. If I go to the detail of the event, you see that the Nitin is added as guest here. So this was the demo about how to integrate apps script web service with API.ai. So this was it about the integration of apps script with API.ai. So thank you.
That's impressive stuff. So, well, I've got many questions and comments, but I wonder we've got Steve and Jonathan if they've got anything. Steve, I saw Jonathan bailed.
Yeah, I had to unmute. Sorry. Yeah, very impressive. It's interesting how you had the problem of the redirect, and you're able to think through that.
Yes.
In this case, leverage Google App Engine. And I believe you said it's possible to choose another option, like maybe Cloud Functions. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can use any web service. You can use any platform which just receives a HTTP request and then forwards the request to another URL and then receives the request and returns the data on the same URL as requested by the API.ai.
Okay. Yeah.
So any service, it can be any PHP web service or App Engine or Cloud Function. It's up to the person who is going to implement.
Yeah, it was very well done. So thank you.
I think one of the impressive things for me is there wasn't really any noticeable lag. So I'm imagining as you're collecting the individual pieces of information, it's not needing to interact with AppScript. It's only once it's got everything. But even when it got everything, it didn't take long for that response to come up. So are you finding it's, even with the having to do a proxy redirect, that it's not affecting the user experience? Sorry, did you hear that? Okay.
Actually, I broke in between.
I was noticing that there was very little lag there. Is that something you're finding? When you've been testing this, that the response from Google AppScript is
Actually, when I was testing initially when I was directly integrating with AppScript, all the time response was coming like the response from the AppScript is empty, and the error code was 206. I will show you. I just opened. I will show the link to the forum where people have discussed about this. So this is the issue people have posted about integrating AppScript web service directly with the API.ai. So this is the answer from someone where unfortunately I got a bit disappointing answer from. So it was like it is not possible to integrate AppScript web service with API.ai because it doesn't follow the redirect, which is mandatory in the AppScript web service. So it all the time comes like 206 error, empty response.
I noticed there when you're going through your demo as well that the API .ai basically allows you to do an iframe embed of the chatbot. So that makes it very straightforward in terms of, you know, if you were wanting to do something with the in an add-on or in the sidebar, or you know, actually interacting with them, something very straightforward. I suppose the challenge is designing, you know, instead of a kind of a graphic user interface, you're now having to think about a voice user interface, and, you know, constructing those prompts and those questions. But it looks like the API.ai service, you know, helps you a lot in terms of being able, you know, you still need to enter a lot of bits and pieces, but it takes a lot of the headache out.
Yes, actually, it does two things. The one thing is the natural language processing, and the other thing is speech recognition. If you see in this agent, the agent I showed, I will share my screen again. The integration demo by Google, that is also having a mic icon here. So you can converse with this app directly, or you can embed this app in an iframe somewhere in your sidebar or some add-on. Okay, so it does the natural speech recognition for you also. So that's good. Okay. Hello.
Hi. So
Yes.
so you can do voice input as well. Steve, is this sending your cogs whirring in terms of what you might be doing with some of your add-ons?
Yeah, especially since you know how add-ons, you can have a dialogue over your document or form or spreadsheet, but we have the nice sidebar. And as you pointed out, it's interesting that you can, you know, fit right there in the sidebar to have a natural language experience to interface with your data, either by typing or voice. So it does create some ideas. So we'll see where this goes.
Yes.
It's nice that, you know, you've got the benefits of Google Apps Script, where you've got all these services, and, you know, even the ones that aren't in the box in terms of, you know, calendar and you know, the whole list of maps and things like that. It's so easy to plug into these services, and that's what one of the things I really liked about your demonstration was you know, you were able to create, you know, a calendar event very quickly within a couple of lines of code from the data that you got back from API.ai. So there's a lot of scope there in terms of what you can do quickly and easily. So I'm looking forward to seeing what other people come up with in terms of how you can integrate this. Maybe we should have a competition. What do you think, Steve?
Maybe.
Well, thanks for that, Waqar. So we'll share the links to your slides, and which has the various links you had in your talk, so people can have a look at that and delve deeper into that. So, well, I think, unless Steve, you've got any other questions?
No, I'm good, thanks.
We'll move on to app verification. So this is something that recently came out from Google. So there's basically, as a result of a couple of high-profile phishing exploits that are using Google Apps Scripts, Google have tightened up basically how things work. So you'll and quite a few people have posted scratch heading moments in the Google Plus community. So previously, when you were using, you know, you deployed a web app or an add-on, or you know, you had something container bound within something like a Google Sheet. If you use scope, so if you were calling services then that would prompt basically the authentication flow, so that the user would have to select their Google account and give permission for that. What Google have done is actually tighten this up. So now they've got a whole verification layer in that. So if your application is using certain scopes and it needs verification from the user, unless you've had your app verified, you're going to get this kind of HTTPS certificate failure type dialogue, where the only way to proceed is quite scary. You have to click on advance, and you have to click on the unsafe option. You have to type something in. So this has created quite a few headaches for people in the community. So there's documentation on that, but we thought we'd just delve a bit deeper into what how you can prevent getting the app verification dialogue coming up. So either through verification process or just looking at how your script is coded and some of the other implications. So there's more documentation. So it's probably worth just spending a moment just to mention where we are with add-ons. So with add-ons, there was already a publication process in place. So verification has been integrated into that. And Steve, I think you mentioned earlier that you've had an app go through add-on verification, and it was okay for you? Your experience was okay?
Yeah, just this week I had a client that was very complex add-on, and I thought, okay, I prepared my client to say, we'll have a to-do list of items to fix, and then we'll just go finally get it approved. But to my surprise, it was accepted, approved without any to-do items. So I guess we, just follow the best practices that's on the online documentation that Google add-ons have, and make sure you have your privacy policy set. And if you check off all those items, you can expect maybe a nice experience with the process of getting it approved. You do have something listed on your slide that I did follow up with Google on, and they added that portion, that last paragraph you have that says add-ons that are published to a limited set of users or domains. I just wanted to clarify that a little bit more, if I could.
Mm-hmm, sure.
So if you imagine, if you go into your script editor, you click publish, and you have choices. And in this case, if you click web app as an add-on, or you publish as an add-on, when you finally get to kind of like the Chrome Web Store area, near the end, you have an option to say public within, I think, my domain, unlisted, maybe to a group. Well, if you click public, the existing process that I just described moments ago kicks in, right? However, if you do click something that's not public, then you may experience this verification thing. So they basically are recommending, if you're having an add-on that's not public, you may have an issue, maybe within your domain, hopefully not, but if it's unlisted link, then you may have this verification issue, in which case you should go through the verified app process by filling out the form. So that's what I wanted to clarify on that.
That's a very, very useful point, Steve. So I think, given that it doesn't, as you say, it doesn't trigger the automatic, if it's public, it triggers the automatic.
Yeah, because public
verification.
Yeah, because public already has a process from day one, from 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when add-ons became a living thing, right? So
that's something, and we'll talk in a second about the verification process outside of add-ons. So there is a separate form for you to fill in, and there's a couple of requirements for that as well. So just moving on. So that was verification for add-ons. Now for web apps and other deployments. So this is, if you publish a web app, or if you have a container-bound script, so something attached to a document, a spreadsheet, or a form, or whatever. So the script is part of that document, and you know, one with kind of the original way of distributing those before we had add-ons was just to give anyone view access, and they would make a copy of it. So this is kind of the matrix of what's going to trigger an authentication flow. My understanding of this is you'll only get the unverified authentication flow if you're hitting certain scopes. Wrong on that. So I'm getting a nod from Steve. So if your script isn't using certain scopes, then you'll just get the normal authentication flow. So what this is showing is if you published a web app or other deployment using a Gmail account, and it's using a sensitive scope, you are going to get the unverified auth flow. So there's no way around that. So and the first column or the second column, you know, is if you go through the verification process. So you just get the normal. You still have to get people to click, you know, their account and to accept the scopes, but they don't get that scary. This is an unsafe or unverified app. Within G Suite, there's a couple of things. So if you're publishing something in your G Suite domain and it's used by another G Suite user in your domain, they're not going to get the unverified authentication. It's only when you go outside of your G Suite domain that you're going to have to start looking at if you want to get your app verified. So I don't know if there's anything either you want to add to that, or correct me if I've got anything with that wrong.
Well, the only thing that comes to mind, and I don't know the answer, is if you have a client that has subdomains, I'm not sure how this table is affected. So, for example, if I have a primary domain and the normal authorization flow occurs, but what if now I'm branching out to the row number 2 that's account not of customer A? In other words, it's a subdomain. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe it's fine. Maybe subdomains are fine. I don't know yet.
Yeah, well, I'll maybe see if we can get a comment on that one. It's not something I know. Waqar, I don't know if it's something you. No.
Actually, I have not followed much this issue, so right. I'm not much aware about it.
So, if I just if I jump back, so there is, when we should start this talk off, there was this kind of you could still use an unverified app, but you had to click on the advanced and then do the unsafe thing. So users can do that, but there is a cap on the number of users that can basically click on, you know, do that process. I haven't seen any numbers on what the cap is. I don't know, Steve, you've seen anything on this?
It just reminds me that before the authorization flow was implemented shortly ago, before that, the cap was more noticeable. Yeah. But since they started this process, it's kind of supposed to be replacing it. So hopefully that's more of a minor thing, what we're talking about now with the cap, yeah. But we'll see.
And yes, so in the web app, we'll come on to this in a second. There was a whole, if you published the web app, there was only, I think it was 50 users a day. But whether it's the same number, it's a slightly different cap we're talking about here. So again, that might, gray area, perhaps we'll get some comment on that and clarify. So shortly after Google did the kind of push notifying users about this, Wesley Chun, who's a developer relations at Google, posted on the Google Plus community. So just clarifying a couple of things. So the first thing he mentioned was that the unverified app flow only kicks in for sensitive scopes. So Google haven't published a list of sensitive scopes, and I'm guessing they haven't published it because it's not a fixed list. It'll probably change over time. But doing a quick test within the script editor, this was a couple of weeks ago now, so this might be out of date. But these were the scopes I found that were causing the unverified app flow. So if you include these scopes within your script project, then and if you're publishing it as a web app, distributing it as a container bound, or doing an unlisted add-on, these were the scopes that were triggering the unverified applications. There was I've included a couple of surprise ones. So spreadsheets, slides, and docs, I could kind of see, because these scopes are quite broad. They allow writing and reading of data. They're not usually restricted. Format was fine. Similarly, Gmail, whilst is a scope that needs you to go through a verification process, Mail app wasn't. So there's some interesting variations in there. I don't know, Steve, if you've got any comment on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you went through that exercise. It helps us to figure out what is sensitive.
Yeah.
Now, one thing with Mail app, I believe that's more of like a read-only type of service, where Gmail app allows you to do updates.
Yeah.
So I can see the differences there.
One other thing, so this came off the back of a post I think you were contributing, Steve, on in the G Suite add-on developer community, was one of the things that you can do is you can restrict the scopes within your projects by using the only current document annotation. So what this does is means that if you're using any of these listed scopes which are currently sensitive, by using only current doc, you negate that. So because it's limited to a single document, you don't get into the unverified app flow. So this was actually a godsend for me, because one of my most popular projects is a Google Sheet with a container bound script, so it's not an add-on. So by using only current doc in that script, people can use that as previously without the unverified app flow. And that's probably something else just to mention, that when you're distributing something as a container bound script, you can't actually get that verified because it's a container bound script, and when someone makes a copy of it, basically they would have to get their copy verified themselves. So you can't get a template verified. So that's something just to be aware of. But I suppose less people are doing container bound stuff. Steve, are you still doing container bound distribution?
Well, it's interesting. This particular add-on for this client that was approved, he has a report segment, and the report is basically using a spreadsheet. So I said, well, we could simply create a spreadsheet, make it like a template, and we'll copy the template that contains the contained app script that has a custom menu of like 2 items. So it was very simple and basic. I thought, okay, great. But as you pointed out, as soon as you make a copy of a spreadsheet, in this case, that contains an app script, it's considered new.
Yeah.
And you have the verification issue. So that probably means, in this use case, we need to use an add-on for something that's very, very simple, but that gets around it.
Mm. Yeah. So I'm in a way, I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one that's distributing container bound script, but I am moving to an add-on. Don't worry, folks. I will eventually get around to the add-on. So just back to the post from Wesley Tune. So existing apps are not affected. So if I can't remember, I think this was 21st of July. Yeah, it was 19th of July or something. It was around early mid-July that this came out. So
yeah, I think it was the 18th, and it's not affected yet is the key word. So it may be a big experience to start going through all the existing ones. But as of now, they're for anything new. So
yeah. So the other thing was the per day authorization throttling was a temporary measure, and it's been rolled back in favor of an unverified app cap. So what I think this means, or is referring to, is this was something else that Steve, you contributed on, was the 10 web apps new authorization limits. So this was something that appeared in the documentation, and now I can't find it anymore. So I'm guessing this is what Wesley was referring to, that publishing as a web app is not restricted now to the quotas that were there for
exactly. Yeah, that's what I was referring to about this new verification process, like July 18th, whatever.
Yeah,
it's kind of replacing this. So,
but there's that mention of a cap for even with the unverified app cap, but doesn't seem to be any documentation on that. So we'll try and get clarification. I think the last thing, you have public-facing app scripts go through the verification process to remove the unverified web app warning. So quickly, what does that look like? There are a couple of requirements for verification. So, this is for a standalone web app or script project. So this is, as mentioned earlier, add-ons. It's integrated into public add-on process. So I'm guessing, Steve, some of this looks familiar for you in terms of the submission you did. So for a requirement for verification is the first thing is that you have a domain that is verified ownership with Google. So this is a website domain. Was that something that, I suppose, was that already within the add-ons verification process that you needed that?
Not really. The original verification process with add-ons wasn't particularly interested in having a domain to be verified, but now I believe that is the case. So with this client that I referred to, we did have a G Suite business account, the one that you pay $10 a month per user for, that level. And so that was good, check off. And then we did spend a lot of time to create a nice privacy policy. So those are the things that I think is why we had a successful approval.
So yeah, the second, so a website. So if you're a G Suite customer, I'd imagine you're going to have a domain owned anywhere, but there needs to be a public-facing website where on your verified domain you can put your privacy policy. So those are the two things that you need. There's various other bits and pieces that you need to provide, so information on the scopes that you're using and why you're using them. But there's more documentation on that on the website. So more bits and pieces for you to have to do as a Google Apps Script developer if you want to publish web apps, add-ons, or other script projects that are using these sensitive scopes. But Steve, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, generally, there's a group of app scripters, if you want to call it that, where some of us are kind of like, the hackers, where, hey, I just have a Gmail account, I just want to create these things, and it's, maybe it's for a few people, but it's almost like we really should take the next professional step to say, you know what, I better create a domain, I better professionalize this a little bit more, because for the sake of the end user safety with phishing attacks. So that's a transition that in the AppScript community that I think we really need to accept and hold, embrace, to say we really need to become more professional by having a professional domain that can be verified.
I know Jonathan's back. Is there anything you want to ask or add to the?
I think I've been following this a little bit because I've a latent fear that I'm going to be deluged with all of my prototype projects that I've got running for both my company and a bunch of others of suddenly not working, and the sort of the headaches of late night calls of why isn't it working. Most of the add-ons that I produce end up being registered directly only to a G Suite domain. I don't do really anything public facing, but bespoke tools for private enterprise. So I'm hoping that I'm less likely to be touched by it, but I haven't really worked out from the documentation whether that is the case. So that's my hope, but the fear is that I've not. I mean, one way around it is to have a sort of a common OAuth project in the developer portal and kind of have that authorized, and then have a whole load of app scripts that only refer to that single OAuth console project. That would be one way of managing the fact that I've got lots and lots and lots of these little things running, and to try and bring those into an alignment probably.
So, Jonathan, you're saying you're not impacted yet, but you're wondering if you will be.
Yes, I've certainly been following it with interest. I haven't had any notification. Everything that I've worked on still works. I don't know whether, when that will happen, if it will happen, and that's what's been unclear, I think.
Does your company use subdomains by any chance?
No, we don't.
Okay, I was just curious.
We think you'd be safe if you're mostly working in a domain environment, so you're publishing stuff just for the G Suite set of domain users. So far, you seem to be ticking the requirements and not needing to go through the verification process.
It's only if something that's older and it was done doing something with some scope that somehow isn't linked to it, because there are some scopes that are definitely linked to G Suite Enterprise, SLA, service level agreements, and they're definitely bound in. And there are some things that sometimes you borrow on and bring in, and I can't remember. I haven't kept detailed track of everything, and it's the older ones that I'm kind of worried about. But we'll see.
The other question I had, which I haven't got a good answer yet, is what happens with libraries. So if you get a library verified, does the script project that uses that library, does that inherit the verification? And what happens if that library changes? And it might not be your library. You could be using a third-party library. I've asked this question and I haven't got a response. I don't know if anyone else here has asked a similar question.
It's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know.
Because the library itself isn't actually running ever. So that library code could contain all sorts of
the response I got was I was told to consider the script project to basically consider it as inheriting all the code from the library into the script project. So even if the library was verified, I would still need to get the script project verified. But
I mean, line 1 of page 1 of the add-on says don't use libraries. So maybe this was coming over the hill for some time.
So we're all kind of rolling with the punches here and just seeing where it goes. I agree with Steve. I think in terms of creating an environment that people are confident in using, I think it's perhaps needed. There's some of the details that for example, the unverified app screen. For me, it looks too much like a SSL certificate error page that you get in your browser, and I don't know if that level of fear is needed. Perhaps it is, given that phishing attacks can be quite destructive. Perhaps we need that level of fear, similar to a bad SSL certificate. And well, that's what we had on app verification. It's, as I mentioned, whilst a lot of the dust has settled, I think there's still more things to be worked out. And we look forward to the contributions from the community, the things that they discover, questions they have on this particular topic. And with that, I don't think we've got anything more, unless we have any final questions or thoughts.
Yeah, I do have one thing I just want to follow up on that we mentioned in a previous broadcast. I guess I should share my screen. I'll do that right now. Okay. There's also an effort to say, if I'm an admin and let's say I use the G Suite Marketplace and I bring over or install a solution and application on behalf of all my users in the domain, there's another level of authorization that's possible now in the control panel to say, well, I may only want to authorize spreadsheets, not necessarily Drive. And if someone turns that on at the administrator to kind of restrict it, it's possible that you may have an add-on that was installed by that administrator and the end user is getting an error. And then that could get back to the developer of the add-on. And so this is a post that was out there. And supposedly what the error message should say is to say, contact your administrator. Don't contact the developer of the add-on. So I just wanted to highlight that if you have an add-on and you're getting some sort of permission that errors that you may be trapping yourself, you should be no action on your part. There should have been a message for the end user to contact their administrator that they need to turn on that Google Drive or whatever. So that's how it's supposed to flow.
So just to recap that, if an admin's done a domain-wide deploy of an add-on, but they haven't switched one of the permissions on, it's throwing an error message. Yeah, or let's say the other use case, that before this new opportunity of tightening down authorizations by service, that maybe 1,000 people within the domain have been using your add-on, then all of a sudden the next day they're getting an error, and it's because the admin says, oh, there's a new tightening down service by service levels, right? And if they said, well, no one should have access to Drive, all of a sudden they get an error. So that could be another use case. Jonathan, I know you do a lot of domain-wide deploy. I suppose that's less of an issue because you're talking to the administrators directly.
Usually, but people change, and it depends on who gets these notifications. So, basically, as Steve was saying, if someone gets a notification, oh, I can now exercise all this control and fine tune, and I'll be the rock star super security guy, and then suddenly they break a whole bunch of spaghetti code way back in. Yeah, there's always that risk, and these things do happen. Staff changes, and
I suppose the other issue is there are third-party services as well that admins can use to basically firewall or sandbox or block. I think someone mentioned to me one of my AppScript projects, it couldn't be used on their domain anymore because I was specifically targeted, it sounded like, by the admin and switched off.
So you've upset somebody.
Yeah. But thanks for that, Steve. It's useful just to flag, so if other developers are experiencing similar headaches like that. Was an issue ticket opened with that issue? No, because what I was told through a Google contact that was listed in that post, the user should clearly get a message to contact their administrator. Therefore, we don't need to file an issue ticket. Okay. Well, thanks for it, Steve. So I think we're actually going to finish on time for once. Yay! And I'd just like to thank Waqar for his contributions to today's show. So, as mentioned, we'll provide links to his slides, and we'll have an edited version as well of the video, so you can watch that back at your pleasure. Thank you to Steve as well for his support in today's episode, and Jonathan for your contributions as well. We don't actually have a topic for our next Totally Unscripted, so now is your opportunity to put your requests in. I've actually got a vague recollection that Rudy recently tagged Totally Unscripted with a suggestion, so that's one way of pinging us. You can get us on Totally Unscripted on Google+, and there's contact forms on the Totally Unscripted website as well. So if you've got any suggestions, please get in touch, or if you want to come on the show yourself and contribute, we're always more than happy to do that. So I think that is it, and we'll see you next time on Totally Unscripted.
Bye.